Renzu. It is said that Ren Jianji, a native of Yutai, Shandong, made a living by selling felts and fur coats. He took all his capital with him to Shaanxi. I met a man on the road who called himself Shen Shooting and was from Suqian County, Jiangsu Province. The two had a very good conversation and became brothers, so good that they never left each other. When he arrived in Shaanxi, Ren Jianji fell ill, and Shen Shooting took good care of him. More than 10 days later, his condition worsened, and Ren Jianji said to him, "My family doesn't have much property, and the livelihood of 8 people depends on me doing business outside. Now that I have unfortunately contracted this disease, I'm afraid that these bones will be thrown away in a foreign land. In this place more than 2,000 miles away from home, besides you, my brother, who else can I rely on? There are more than 200 taels of silver in the bag. You take half of it. And besides buying me a coffin or something, the rest is yours travel expenses. The other half would like you to send it to my wife, so that she can hire a car to transport me back. If you, brother, are willing to take me home in person, then all the expenses will be borne by my share." After saying that, he wrote a letter to his wife on the pillow, handed it to Shen Shooting, and died that night. Shen Shooting only spent 5 or 6 taels of silver to buy a thin-skinned coffin to bury Ren Jianji. The owner of the store urged him to transport it away quickly, so he used the excuse to find a monk and a Taoist priest to do a monastery for his deceased friend, and never returned. It took the Ren family a year before they were convinced. Ren Jianji's son is named Renzu. He is 17 years old and is studying. When he heard the news of his father's death, he went to Shaanxi to retrieve his father's coffin. His mother was reluctant to ask him to go because he was too young. He cried until he died, and then her mother agreed. He sold his things to prepare for his travel expenses and sent an old servant to go with him. He didn't come back until half a year later. After the funeral, the family was destitute. Fortunately, Renzu was smart and became a scholar in his county. It's a pity that this child has a wild temperament and loves to gamble. Although his mother strictly disciplines him, he just doesn't change. Once when the examiner came to take the exam, he only passed the 4th grade. His mother was so angry that she cried and couldn't eat. He was ashamed and scared, and vowed to study hard. After studying behind closed doors for a year, I finally passed the exam with distinction, and began to enjoy the clothing and food provided by the state. His mother advised him to accept a few students and teach, but people knew about his past behavior and did not believe him. They ridiculed him and he failed to teach. Renzu had a cousin named Zhang who was doing business in Beijing. He was willing to take him to Beijing without paying his travel expenses. Renzu was very happy and took a boat with his cousin. Arriving at the boundary of Linqing, the ship anchored at the west gate of the city. At that time, many ships carrying salt were also parked there, with sails and beams like woods. After falling asleep, the sound of water and people kept him awake. It was still late at night, and suddenly I heard the sound of dice being thrown on the neighboring boat. It was tinkling, clear and melodious, touching people's hearts, and Renshu's hands couldn't help but itch. Hearing that all the people on the boat were fast asleep, he touched the 1,000 coins in his bag and wanted to go on the boat to have some fun. He got up gently and packed his baggage and picked up the money, but he hesitated again when he remembered his mother's teachings. So I put my wallet away and went to sleep. After all, I felt uneasy and still couldn't fall asleep. Get up again and unpack again. After struggling like this 3 times, I finally couldn't bear it anymore and took the money on the neighboring boat. I saw 2 people betting against each other. The stakes were huge. He put the money on the table and asked to join the game. The 2 welcomed him and rolled the dice together. After a while, Renzu won a great victory. One of the 2 lost all his money, so he gave a large piece of silver to the owner of the boat. As a pledge, exchanged it for change, and started gambling again. Later, I bet more than $10,000, trying to make a desperate move. Just as I was getting excited about gambling, another person came. After watching for a long time, he also took out all his money and entered the gambling game. Renshu's cousin woke up in the middle of the night and found that Renzu was not on the boat. Hearing the sound of dice, he knew that Renzu was going to gamble, so he went to the neighboring boat and planned to stop him. When he saw the pile of money next to Renshu's legs, he stopped talking. What? He carried several $1,000s back to the ship and called out several guests on the same ship to go transport the money with him. After several trips, there were still more than $10,000 left. After a while, the 3 guests on the neighboring ship were all defeated. There was no more money on the ship, and the 3 guests wanted to bet money. However, Renzu had no interest in gambling anymore, so he used the excuse that he only bet money and not money. His cousin kept urging him. He stopped gambling and went back to the ship to sleep. The 3 guests were anxious about losing. The boat owner was greedy for tips from gamblers and wanted to continue gambling. So he took the initiative to borrow a lot of money from other boats. Now that the 3 guests had money, they gambled more happily, and soon they all belonged to Renzu again. It was already dawn, and the lynching pier had started sailing early. Renzu, his cousin, and the passengers on the same ship transported the winning money to their own ship, and the 3 guests also dispersed. The owner of the neighboring ship was shocked when he saw that the more than 200 taels of silver pledged as collateral were all the ashes of paper ingots taken to the grave. He found Renshu's ship and planned to ask Renzu to compensate for his losses. After asking for his name and address, he found out that he was Ren Jianji's son, so he had to shrink his neck and retreat with a blushing face. It turns out that the owner of the boat is Shen Shooting. Renzu also heard about it when he went to Shaanxi to look for his father's coffin. Today, the ghost has given him retribution and will no longer pursue his past mistakes. Renzu and his cousin entered into a joint venture to do business in the north, and by the end of the year they had made several times the profits. Soon, according to the routine, he was promoted to a supervisor. Renzu also became better at calculating financial accounts. Within 10 years, he became the richest man in that area.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.